Okay, I will call the Southbury Board of Selectmen regular meeting to order at May 2nd, 2019 at 7 p.m. Do we have the Pledge of Allegiance? I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, before we start, I'd like to add to the agenda an executive session to discuss appointment and compensation of interim assistant treasurer's position.
Make the motion.
Have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It carries. I'd like to do that under after unfinished business, if we can. Okay, public comments. If you have any public comments, please limit it to 3 minutes. State your name.
I'm Kelly Taggart. I live in Southbury, and I'm the chairman of the Pompano River Watershed Coalition. And this town of Southbury has been a great supporter of that organization that protects our water and our water resources, the Pompano River and the whole watershed. Saturday, from 11 o'clock until 4, his birthday in the Woodbury Hollow, and it's sponsored by the Pompano River Watershed Coalition. And I would just love to make sure that everybody's invited and knows about it, and hopefully will come. Thank you.
Thanks, Cal.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
Yes. Good evening. I'm Mark Romeo and Southwood. I thought I'd give you a little update about the budget. It's just come out. I read something about it, but I thought I'd try to give you a little bit more of an insight into it, especially the parts that might have an impact on the town of Southwood. The budget that was passed out by the Appropriations Committee, basically a party line vote, contains a number of new taxes and a variety of changes to spending patterns and so forth. But the part that most directly affects the town is related to the cost of the teacher pension. Remember, a couple of years ago, Governor Malloy proposed that towns pick up a larger percentage of the cost of teacher pensions, and that was rejected by the legislature. Governor Lamont proposed a somewhat similar but smaller version of that proposal, which would have cost the towns about $23 million in the first year, and I believe something in the neighborhood of $50 million in the second. Southbury's share of that would have been in the tens of thousands of dollars in year one, and it would have risen in year two and year three into the hundreds of thousands. The budget that was reported out by the Appropriations Committee did not contain that proposal. However, the co-chairs of the committee stated that they were open to further negotiations on this issue. And they were able to balance the budget without using this device to try to shift costs to the towns because of an increase in the revenues coming in from the income tax that has helped out a lot of different ways of the budget. But it is still on the table for further negotiations. And the way this works is that you may not find out until after the budget passes, as the town budget passes, what's going to happen with this particular proposal. Right now, there's a substantial chance that we may not end up with a resolution to the budget during the regular session. So a lot of talk about it going into special session, which means it would be June or perhaps July or maybe even later before the final budget is adopted by the legislature, as was the case in 2017. And it really shouldn't have to go that, but that sometimes happens, but even it shouldn't happen. So I thought you should be made aware of that. Plus, there's another proposal that's out there called the Family Leave Program that would provide for paid family leave for employees of any employer, even if you only have one person, if you're a sole proprietor. And there are two versions of this that are out there. One is the one that the governor proposed, which, and this again specifically to a town like Southbury, makes a difference because the governor's proposal was not to cover municipalities. The legislative proposal, again, on a party line vote coming out of the Labor Committee, would cover municipalities, And so if you have a friend that's been really helpful to you, and you think of as being almost like a brother or almost like an aunt or an uncle or something, that person could, they become sick, you can take time off from work to go help take care of them, or vice versa. That situation develops. So if the legislative version, as it's called, of this bill passes, then towns would be liable for this. And the employees would have to pay 0.5% of their salary in the form of a payroll tax in order to fund this new program. And for someone making $50,000, that would be $250 a year, and it would rise up to a maximum of about $132,000, same Social Security, so that that 0.5% would cover a larger salary, and therefore the people would be paying more into it. So depending on what the salaries are for different employees, I don't know if anybody working for the town makes $132,000 a year, but some people do make a lot more than $50,000 as their salary. So that would be available to anyone who's working for the town. And even if the town has its own family medical leave program, you can't opt out of the state one under the legislative proposal. The governor's proposal seems to allow a little bit more flexibility, but there's a very strong impetus for sort of force everybody into this program. So the budget is still in a state of flux, but what's I think most important for the town is that while right now there's nothing about the teacher pension fund shift, it is still on the table under serious consideration. And the co-chairs of the Appropriations Committee who did the budget, did pass, said they're still open to negotiation on that subject with the governor. And he does not appear to have given up on having the teacher pension fund cost partially shifted to municipalities. So I don't know if you have any questions or anything.
If we're going to do that, we need to add it to the agenda.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Arthur.
Thanks, Arthur. Thanks, Arthur.
Any other public comment?
Good evening. My name is Bob Bedard, 7 Stiles Road, Southbridge, Connecticut. I have a letter here I'd like to read to you from past Chief Joe Dillard. Dear Board of Selectmen, I'm a longtime resident of this town, serving on the fire department for 45 years. Several of those years of going through a chain of command as an officer, and ultimately serving as fire chief for 2 different times for several years. I'm also self-employed, running a business with employees, so I understand on-the-job injuries and workers' compensation. I don't know all the particulars to Mr. Bedard's workers' compensation case, nor is any of my business. But when someone is volunteering for the fire service, gets injured, and gets to run around by the insurance companies and/or bureaucracy to the point it causes the individual financial hardship, I have a problem with that. 6 to 7 years of runaround and stonewalling is not acceptable. I know from personal experience from getting injured myself back some 18 years ago with a knee injury, when the injury report was filed with the town, but no medical attention was needed at the time. A few months later, a problem developed due to the injury. I was treated by my doctor for about a year when he advised me I would need a surgeon for my knee injury. I told him that wouldn't be possible because his bills for the past year were still unpaid. I went to the town's financial office, where the secretary told me it was up to me to make calls to the workers' comp, in which I instructed her, as an employer myself, it was the responsibility of the employer to make those contacts. She told me she didn't know what else could be done. As I walked out of the office door, I turned around and told her that I would have to do what others do to get things done, and I would have to sue the town within a couple of weeks. My doctor was paid, and I received the approval to see a surgeon. At a time when it's hard enough to get and retain volunteers, issues like this should be resolved in a more smooth and efficient manner. Thank you, Past Chief Joe Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Bedard.
Any other public comment?
I'm Joe Ruggiero. I'm at 245 Skyview Drive here in Southbury. I'm here tonight to request that this board undertake and pass a resolution against the proposed tolls that are being considered on I-84 in Connecticut. 14 towns have adopted various forms of no-toll resolutions. I'm not going to list them, but they're listed here. Many of these resolutions passed with overwhelming bipartisan support. Some did not. Even if you don't want to address the broader revenue issues, fine, then this board should still quickly consider and adopt a resolution, even if it is just to state that we do not want a toll gantry located in our town or in close proximity thereof, like the city of Milford did. The toll gantry located in between exits 15 and 16 will end up driving interstate traffic onto local roads like Old Waterbury Road and Route 6, because people and smart GPS devices will cause them to avoid individual toll gantries. You don't have to take my word for it, the toll study actually says this. Quote from the CTDOT November 2018 toll study, it says, if tolls are introduced, motorists currently using the toll-free routes are anticipated to respond in a variety of ways. Way number 3 is they can alter where they enter or exit a freeway to avoid a particular tolling point. The diversion of travel to an alternate non-toll route would add traffic to these roads and could have some negative local impacts. That's the end of the quote. So diverting to local roads is acknowledged in the study, yet no solution is posited in the study to alleviate the issue. If you think that having a movie theater on our main street or a church located on Kettletown Road contributes to local traffic, those will pale in comparison to having even a tiny fraction of traffic off of I-84 come onto our local streets, because people do not want to pay the tolls. A statewide poll by Sacred Heart University in Fairfield in March showed that 59% of people are against tolls, 34.7% are in favor. The poll also showed that nearly 55% said they would try other roads to avoid tolls, and 36% said they would be more likely to support tolling if it was guaranteed to be in a lockbox. While I understand that this Board of Selectmen generally doesn't want to comment on or consider state or federal issues, this issue, in my mind, is a local issue and will have specific and very local effects. While there have been tolls in Connecticut in the past, there have never been tolls in I-84, never in Southbury. Please take action while you can to prevent this, and remember that this is an election year.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joe.
Any other public comment? Any other public comment? Any other public comment? Seeing none, we'll move on. Next is presentation we're going to have on workman's compensation and how it works. Jeff, you're the,
Yes, thank you. We have with us tonight Attorney Andrew Byrne, who's the town's workers' compensation lawyer, hired through the insurance company. We have Scott Sundberg from H.D. Seeger. So since Andrew's the expert, address this.
Good evening. I'm here at your request and happy to answer questions or to present in any way or fashion that would be appropriate.
Could you basically explain when when a claim is made, what that process and where it goes?
Absolutely, absolutely. In an ordinary process, a person is injured and the injury is reported by the claimant, the employee, and usually there's a point person in the town with the employer who gets that and fills out what's called a first report of injury. Often an accident report or his own first report of injury is filled out by the claimant. And in my experience in your town, that is how it's been. The insurance company will fill out a first report of injury and file it with the commission. And that's where a claim begins. If there's a claim that isn't reported, sometimes a notice of claim is filed. If the claimant wants to perfect a case, he files what's called a Form 30C, and that is, it has to be filed either by certified mail or personal presentation, and that's usually filed with the employer and with the workers' comp carrier. The medical benefits are paid. Workers' comp basically gives 3 types of benefits. The statute was enacted in Connecticut in 1913, and it was enacted as an outgrowth of the Industrial Revolution, really, to make sure that companies and businesses could still function, but that the employee wasn't lost in a shuffle. That if an employee was injured, we got rid of all of the legal issues of fault and went right to the issue of if an injury arises out of and in the course of employment, we're going to give an employee 3 basic things, which is medical treatment, wage loss, wage replacement, and then ultimately a benefit called specific, which is when somebody has lost permanently a portion of themselves. We say if somebody has a back injury and ultimately the doctor decides they've lost 10%, they have a 10% permanent partial disability, there's a chart in workers' comp that pays them for that.
So once it's, my question I guess would be, once it's in the hands of workman's comp, is the business that they worked for, that the person worked for, do they have any say in what happens from there? Do they have any, so that if the town has a workman's comp claim and somebody is hurt, and it goes to the workman's comp commissioner, it's my understanding is it that the workman's compensation commissioner?
That's what the workers' comp commissioner is for. The workers' compensation system is designed, and in this state we have 8 different commissions, and we have legions of informal hearings, which are very informal and are held all day long, 5 days a week. And they're to resolve issues. My doctor wants me to have an MRI, and the insurance company doesn't want to approve it. They are disputing this body part. They're disputing this issue. And so we go to workers' comp commissions. That's what I do. I actually do it on both sides. I represented claimants. Primarily, I represent employers, though. But we go before workers' comp commissioners, and workers' comp commissioners are the ones who resolve those disputes.
Okay, so you'll be going to the meetings representing one or the other through let's say you're representing the company. You would be going there to represent the company who the insurance carrier is.
That's my primary client. So in this case, as I'm here tonight, because I represent the town of Southbury in some workers' compensation matters. And so you folks are my client. The insurance company hires me, and in fact, if there were, in an insurance law, if there were any kind of a dispute between you and your insurance company, my duty is greater to you, to protect you. So, yes, you would be my client.
Okay. Mike, do you have any questions?
I
You
have
look
a
like you have a
question.
question. That's
Well,
why.
not a question, more of a comment. It's odd when we have on our agenda a vaguely phrased presentation that's then presented with no context whatsoever for any of us. And then when the gentleman comes to present, says, "You asked me to be here. I don't have a presentation unless you'd want me to present." No, you know. So I really think there's, why are we having this presentation? And, both for us here, and I think that those in attendance should have at least a little bit of context for sorry for that feedback, why we're having so much, such a discussion at this time where for 4 years we've sat here, almost 3.5 years, and we haven't had this conversation.
Well, we
Why
have a
not?
workman's compensation issue that has been brought up, and I thought it was important that this board have some understanding of workman's comp. This is a board meeting, of how it works and why what transpires and what influence or whatever that could be, how it works.
Okay, that's fine, but I think the context is what was missing.
I can also state that I understand that there's a complaint and a concern in this town from a workers' comp claimant, and I think we've heard some complaints that this individual feels that the town or process hasn't worked properly, and I understood that I was being called here to address how we do that and what's been done. And I appreciate, Mr. Rosen, you bringing that up. If you want me to be more specific, I would be happy to, but I'm going to be specific only to the extent that I'm not going to violate anybody's privacy.
Forgive me, I don't know your name. I know it
I'm
was said,
sorry.
but no, that's
Sure.
okay.
It's Attorney Andrew Hearn.
Andrew Hearn, okay. Attorney Hearn, how long does the process take typically when somebody makes one of these?
It's a hard question, Ms. Naylor. So in terms of how long
From the moment they file a form?
file a claim to what?
What do you call it, a first report of injury?
Well, that,
To the settlement or the denial or whatever? Is there an average?
that would be, so in an average claim, a person gets injured, and usually they get medical treatment right away. They might be out of work right away. They might get to a point where the doctor says they can work light duty, they can work 4 hours a day, not 8, or 6 hours a day. Or the doctor says that the conservative measures aren't working, and so we need to have surgery. So they go into surgery, they might have gone from being out light duty to totally out. Everybody's case is different in terms of whether or not it's a cut of a finger or a crippling injury. All of the circumstances will mandate how long things take. They are also fact-driven, very fact-driven. So if somebody has a case that's hotly disputed, that doesn't line up, then those will take longer, and then the litigation will overtake it. If it's a case that is as clear as a bell, then the medical treatment will not be delayed, and shouldn't be delayed. But if their care or concern, if the person has comorbidities that make it so that they take longer to heal, all of these things factor into it. But generally speaking, we look at a claim and we say, usually about a year after a person is injured, we hope they reach a medical endpoint that we call maximum medical improvement. And at that point, the doctor assesses whether they've had a permanent loss. And that's when they're paid permanency benefits, and that's when the claim starts to dwindle down. But many claims take years, and some claims are over in weeks.
And forgive me, having never filed one, I'm not really familiar with the process, but a volunteer and an employee are treated the same in terms of a municipality?
It's an excellent question, and no, they aren't, not a volunteer, but a volunteer fireman there's a specific statute that makes a volunteer fireman, because the state of Connecticut values what a volunteer fireman does.
Great.
And what they do, and the town of Southbury values it. There's a state statute that provides specifically for these people who put themselves in harm's way and are more likely to be injured, to make sure that there are protections for them. That they don't just say, like we say to everybody else, oh, you made $100 a week. Well, your workers' comp benefits are going to be based on a portion of that $100 a week. Well, if we did that to volunteer fire folks, firefighters, then they would get nothing
Right.
for putting themselves in harm's way. So there's a statute in place specifically for them that creates a compensation rate for them that's a living compensation rate.
Is that reflective of their employment, or is that something it's totally state-driven? I mean, do they
It's
just fall
state-
into a category?
It's state driven.
So if a volunteer made $100,000 at one point and the state says they only get they're only entitled to $20,000,
Well, the nuances of the statute are usually that they get either or. They get either their lost wages or this average production wage.
okay,
benefit.
so either their list. And you indicated, one last question, that we do have a system in place for this initial first report of injury. We have a contact person in town. Did you start out by saying that?
You do. Certainly, in my experience, you have, and in the cases that I'm dealing with, this has all been done.
Great, thank you.
So all of these claims are handled within this commission. So the final arbiter, after all the appeals have been made, and is somebody within this commission. It doesn't go into the standard judicial court system.
Absolutely, Mr. Bertram, and that is why workers' comp is set up as it is, because you could be embroiled in something in court, and you could be waiting for a court date for the longest time. We have, you can just pick up the telephone and call the workers' comp represented. If you're represented, your attorney's going to file a hearing request. But hearings are generally scheduled within 4 to 5 weeks of when a hearing is requested, unless it's an emergency, in which case they're scheduled much quicker.
So in general, and is the commissioner that decides the course of action?
So the commissioner acts as a mediator, as a conciliatory individual in the context of an informal hearing. They can't make either side do anything. In point of fact, the commissioner is supposed to act sort of as a judge, but also really has a duty to almost lean a bit from the middle over toward the claimant side. They are supposed to have an adjudicatory judicial responsibilities. But when you go into a workers' comp hearing room, there's a big table in the middle that we sit at for our informals. And then behind the commissioner, where the commissioner sits at the end of the table, is like a judge's bench. And when they sit up, and I tell people this when I'm in a hearing, I say, we're here at this table to talk about this. For you to air your positions, you don't have to bring evidence here. You don't have to talk about what's upsetting you, what's troubling you, how this is working. And the commissioner is a human being and recognizes time after time that people have to get back to work. They're falling behind in their bills, they're having difficulties, but he or she has to balance that with the fact that, look, there's no evidence that this happened. We don't have a medical report that says you got injured here. We don't have, the witness says you weren't even working that day, or, whatever the difficulties are. The commissioner has to balance that, try to grab some money out of the employer's side and say, can you help this guy over the hump while we investigate this a little bit further? That's what they do at informal hearings, and that's how business is done. And as I say to people, when we're sitting at this table, we talk. When the commissioner goes and sits up there, that commissioner is going to decide either you're right or I'm right. But there won't be a middle ground at that point, and we'll have to live with that answer.
You mentioned there are 8 commissions.
There are 8 commissions through the state, yes.
Do we always get, the Southbury's cases always get assigned to a certain commission?
To a certain commission, not necessarily to a certain commissioner. There's 2 commissioners. Your Southbury's in the Waterbury district, in the 5th district. So your cases get decided in Waterbury, and there are 2 commissioners that hear matters there.
Thank you.
Does the same commissioner in a particular case always be the one that makes the decision, or does it bounce around between the 2?
Excellent question, and yes and no.
Okay.
If somebody had a particular issue, the commissioner, there was something that was nuanced, that the commissioner felt, you know what, I'm going to reassign this to myself. I'm going to tell them that I need to hear this one again. But we do go to whichever commissioners, they have full dockets, and so we try to, the commission works to try to get as much business accomplished as possible, so it doesn't always work out that you get the same commissioner. And sometimes that's good, especially if you feel like, you're not getting somewhere, that this commissioner's not hearing you. It's a good thing to get a fresh hearing, and also the commissioners get reassigned periodically.
So they move around between the different districts.
So in this particular case, there was a question about the filing of a claim, and then the fact that for whatever reason, not filed, it was missed, whatever that is, and then accepted. Does that taint the case at all?
May I suggest that if we're going to discuss the specific case at issue, that we do so in executive session?
Okay.
For the privacy of individuals.
Yes.
I appreciate that.
And
Yes.
invite you in.
I don't want to, I'm limited in terms of how I can answer things. I can answer factually about processes and what was involved, but I certainly don't want to violate anyone's privacy.
So the 2 sides in a meeting here with the commissioner, one would be the claimant and the other would be the insurance company that the town has hired, or whoever the company
I
is.
would beg to differ.
Okay.
The 2 sides would be we call them the claimant and the respondent, and in cases of the town of Southbury, the claimant is the individual employee and the respondent is the town of Southbury. They have an insurance company that financially backs them that benefits. They work for you, and you pay a premium, and they act as your agent. But you, the town of Southbury, are the respondent. That's who I represent, and it's the two parties. And sometimes that gets lost. Sometimes the point you're making is what it feels like. It's an insurance company against a claimant. And I think it's important to often bring employers into the process, and I try to do that when I can, so that you understand what's going on, and so that the commission understands that how this affects you as well, that this isn't just a big behemoth insurance company, it's an employer.
In general, the claimants in general are represented by another attorney?
Usually, more often than not, so workers' comp, I'm an attorney, I get cases assigned to me, and the cases that I get are probably 10% of workers' comp claims. Because 90% of them just go through the process, they don't ever get to litigation, they never have hearings, they don't have problems. They get paid, they get handled, people get back to work. Most of them are small. When they're bigger or they're more controversial, then they get assigned and we have hearings on them. Because that's what workers' comp has, most claimants do feel more comfortable having attorneys. And I feel more comfortable when it's really controversial. I don't think I do a disservice to my own client when I say, Mr. Jones, I think you'd be better off having counsel, because I'm not gonna roll over on this. It's going to be a little bit of a difficult process. We're going to try to get somewhere, but I'm not going to roll over. I have some issues here, and I think you would be better served by having counsel. So yes, most of the time they do have counsel. They don't always have to, and very often, if it's just a person who's perhaps uncomfortable, but there's really nothing controversial, they may ask for hearings, and we walk them through the process. So there are pro se individuals and representatives. I would say 85 or 90% are represented.
Any other?
I have one last question. When does the claimant know that it's the end of the process, that they have no more appeals, or they can't make any further appeal to the commissioner? Is there a point where that happens, or can you continue going?
I don't think there is. I don't think there is, because until a case settles, until we both come to the table and agree that we've settled, resolved a matter, there are other issues that come up. And when a case is open, till the end of time, that claimant can come back and say, well, this is bothering me, or this is what I think is related, and it has to be addressed. I mean, there were circumstances within the claim where some aspect of it got adjudicated, and that becomes final after a point, if it's not appealed. But the open claim, the existing claim, goes on.
Hypothetically, let's say someone gets injured, and let's say they need some sort of an operation, which is agreed that they'll need it. And if for some reason, for health reasons, they cannot have that operation, how long till it's determined they're healthy enough? How long will that stay in the system?
See, that's a very case specific.
Okay, that's fine.
I actually have a case like that where an individual, we've agreed this gentleman needs surgery, but he has such unfortunate comorbidities that he couldn't withstand the surgery. He would likely not survive the surgery. So that this has gone on for years for him not to be trying to get well enough to be able to have the surgery. So it's really going to be a medical question, not a factual one, or it's very case specific.
But as you said to Selectman Bertram, it remains open until it's settled.
It does.
Okay.
It does, except for issues that have been resolved and adjudicated within the context.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Scott Sunberg from Seegers, AC Seegers also here,
Okay.
and I'd like him to just describe briefly an additional benefit that the town provides to employees that supplements workers' compensation.
Nice guy.
Thanks for having me.
Just to give you my background, I'm Scott Sundberg. I've represented as insurance consultant for Southbury probably for the last 20 years, but have been involved maybe for as long as 30 years. But it's an unusual situation to have, just to let you know, that have a representative, especially an attorney representative for an insurance company, come to address this group, which I give extreme amount of credit to the insurance company for offering that individual out here to explain certain things about comp commissions. But as he said, 90% of these claims get reported, get handled, and are taken care of. In addition to workers' compensation benefits, there is another additional benefit which the town pays for, which is an accident disability benefit through an organization called VFIS, which is a volunteer fire insurance service group specializing in fire departments. And that's an additional benefit on top of comp, which is once a comp case has been determined, if there's permanency, there's all levels of reimbursements for disability, death, but many other scheduled benefits that the town does pay for. And that's an additional benefit on top of the workers' compensation, which was described in statutory, there's statutes regarding only volunteer fire. I mean, you're volunteers, you're not covered by comp, unfortunately, so be careful when you walk out the door. We don't want you to sue in town, but it's specific for fire departments. And that is an additional benefit that, as these claims get resolved, and if another body part gets resolved, another claim comes up as a result, they're entitled to that benefit through that accident benefit policy through VFIS.
Is that in addition to what Attorney Ahern was talking about as a normal workman's comp?
No, that's completely elective. You don't, most of the towns try to do a number of things with the volunteer fire departments. I'm involved in about 70 municipalities. Some will do a variety of things, incentives to get more firefighters, make sure they're protected if they're injured. Some offer small pensions for length of service. So a lot of the things that are done outside of what's required, which is workers' compensation is mandated. But there is a lot of creative ways that towns have tried to encourage more volunteers because it's a valuable service they're providing versus having a full-time fire department. So this is one of those benefits that not every town, I can't specifically say that every one of the towns that we represent have that coverage extension, but you guys have chose over a long period of time to continue to provide that benefit, which is an elected benefit, not required.
And that's separate from any compensation that workman's comp insurance,
That's correct. That's in addition to it.
in addition to it.
That is correct.
So if a fireman was to get compensated $100, it doesn't affect this extra policy.
It does not.
So it's in addition to above and everything else.
That is correct.
I know sometimes some things are offset by
No.
others, but it's not.
This is not an offset.
When does it kick in?
Well, it sort of dovetails with the workers' compensation. So when the workers' compensation decides, okay, here's the injury, here's the permanency, again, they also have a schedule of benefits within that VFIS policy. Loss of limb, loss of a digit, loss of eyesight, there's a whole schedule of benefits that are required by that carrier to pay for that specific loss. So it's unlikely, and I've not seen it ever happen, where there was a claim that only went to VFIS that didn't go through the comp situation.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks.
Are we all set with this? At this point, I would move into executive session to discuss strategy regarding pending workman's compensation case of Robert Bedard versus the town of Southbury, inviting Scott Sugberg, Attorney Tinley, and Attorney Ahern, and Art Mulligan in with us. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Discussion?
Discussion.
Discussion.
I just want to reiterate something that I brought up 2 or 3 meetings ago, and I also emailed you about earlier in the week. And the reason I brought it up 2 or 3 meetings ago is because we had an executive session in the middle of the meeting. And I think out of consideration to the public that comes to our meetings and is here for particular agenda items, we should make a better effort to have executive sessions either at the end of our meetings, or, like I suggested last time, have a special meeting at 6:30, so that we don't now leave the room for however long it's going to take, and everyone needs to sit here if they're waiting for a particular agenda item that we're dealing with. So I just wanted to mention,
Take that into
reiterate that.
consideration.
And I would actually support pushing this back today. We have for us a relatively short agenda. We have a large crowd for us. I'm glad to see everybody. Thank you for coming out and getting involved in your government. But I do believe, unless there are some mitigating circumstances that we haven't been informed of, that there is no reason not to move both this item and the second item that was added to executive session underneath any other business, as is normal course of business for the Board of Selectmen, except for special circumstances.
Well, we did this out of consideration for the Scott Sugbury and the Attorney Ahern, who was gracious enough to come to our meeting and to get them through this early on. So
I think it's I think it's a relatively short agenda that we can get through quickly. I think if we focused on it, we could probably be through it in short time. We've gotten through meetings fast before.
Okay.
And you know, unless
You can make a
unless one of our guests really does have a pressing issue, which I do understand and I'm respectful of.
I don't know how long you're talking about, but I have an early morning meeting on Cape Cod tomorrow that I have to be at. It's not a vacation meeting, so I have business that I have to do there. So I'm happy to stay for if it's not very long, but if it's going to be long, it's going to be difficult.
So,
I live in another part of the state.
Understood.
so being the resident municipal lawyer on the board, I'm not looking to keep a bunch of lawyers here that we're paying the whole night. What I am suggesting is we need to do a better job going forward out of consideration for the public, and we need to plan this better, and we could easily have all been here at 6:30 to have an executive session, so as not to do that.
So I'd like to make a recommendation, actually, that out of respect to time, can we put a time limit on it? Like, what time would you like to be out of here? And, you know, probably 10 minutes ago.
how long is our executive session?
No, in reality, I want to be respectful, but I also want to be respectful of the residents who have shown up for the meeting. So, I mean, if we were able to wrap up, you know, can we say, because I think we can get to the bulk of this before we get to the reports, probably in 15 minutes.
Okay.
And if we can get there, let's put 8 o'clock as our deadline. If that's comfortable, that we will return to putting this item of executive session back on the agenda with an 8 p.m. deadline. Let's get through as much of the agenda as we possibly can. And then those who choose to stay for after, you're more than welcome, but at least we're getting through some of it. And I think it's a reasonable compromise.
We can do that.
Good? Is everyone
So,
good?
we have,
15 minutes is okay with me.
so now, okay, now what do we have to do with the motions on the floor?
Which one?
Table it?
Okay, we'll table that?
Withdraw it.
Okay. I think we,
Table.
I'll
Move to
go
table.
for it. So I'll make a motion to, we'll entertain a motion to add the executive session to 8 o'clock. Is that what you want to do?
Or at 8 o'clock, we could just make the motion. Sure.
Do we all like disappear at 8 o'clock? Like, is it, you know, magic?
Okay,
But let's get moving.
Let's start.
okay. Announcements and correspondence? Any issues?
Now, Jeff, can I add, I had asked you to actually, I
Yes.
sent you a note if we could add just one item.
I'm not sure if that's open to the public.
Oh, okay.
That's why.
Okay, yeah, I'm not sure either.
We'll talk
actually.
about that, and
It's
if
being
not, we'll-
sponsored by Smart, so I think
Yeah.
it is, but I'm not
I-
sure. Okay.
I was
that's
involved, okay.
If it is open, maybe you could go out in the town email.
fine. Yeah.
Right, but I
That's
think,
it. Or
I think
post it on
the
social media,
selectmen,
let's find
but I
out.
don't think,
Okay.
Right.
my
It's
indication
not for everybody.
wasn't, that's why I didn't.
Fair enough, thank God, yeah, we don't.
Okay, consent agenda,
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Second?
made and seconded, any discussion?
Yes. Are we dealing with the appointment of the Parks and Rec Director under this consent agenda? It was in an email, but I didn't see it online, so I just have questions about that, if we're dealing with it.
No, I didn't put it, Jason, I don't put those things on the website.
Okay, so,
Personnel stuff.
so is this resolution part of what we're considering under consent agenda?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
So my My question was if you could just speak to the process by which it says on the recommendation interview committee, so what the process was, who the interview committee was.
So the interview committee was two different people from the Park and Rec, Mike Rosen also.
Yep.
Um,
Larry Ernst,
Larry,
Larry
Chuck-
Ernst, Dustin.
Yeah.
Hugenin.
and Charlie
Joe
Rosen was
Ruggiero.
and Joe
Joe.
Ruggiero.
Thank you, Jay.
Dustin was
He
involved?
did.
Dustin actually came back and made interviews, and we got input from all of them, and they did recommend, including myself, and then I also interviewed them and discussed them, and frankly, I think we're going to do very well with this person. Nothing but good reviews. His references, one of which was a superintendent of a school. So very, very pleased with that. So
Okay.
bringing them forward and making an offer letter and contingent upon the backgrounds and make sure everything is in place like they're supposed to be. Then I'll get a start date, and I'm not quite sure when that may be, if it possible, next week, maybe the week after.
And I would just want to, I think you should thank Joe. Joe sort of was the leader of our little group there for the interview process. So thank you, Joe, for shepherding that through.
Anything else?
That was it.
That's fine. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Any consent agenda carries. Minutes of April 18th, 2019,
Motion to approve?
Second?
made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
I abstain, I wasn't here.
You weren't here. Okay. Economic Development, under unfinished business, Economic Development Director. I will be interviewing a candidate that's been recommended by the committee, and I will discuss with him how we may want to work this and what we can do. I'll give him a call. Matter of fact, I have a calendar to get Noreen to get a hold of him for, set that up, and we'll talk to him and hopefully get that moving.
Can we have a little clarity on what it is we're seeking? Because it changed a little bit midway.
It's been kind of changing around. You know, obviously it went, in the new budget, they're looking for full-time. We're trying to do this in a 1099 or consulting type of piece. That's why I'd like to talk to him and sit down and discuss.
Up to the full-time level, though? Or, I mean, are we talking 30 hours, 40 hours, or
I,
still?
I think I'm gonna approach this much like I did with the HR. Let's see what's out there, what they're looking for. We have no numbers from the person yet. No different than, let's see what kind of, and then I'll go from there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, can I just, if you interview him like early next week and you think this guy's great and you want to hire him, can I just suggest that, we can convene earlier to do that? Because I think this is something that people, really want to get moving. So if we're in a position to do it, we could have a special meeting to do that.
Yes.
You want to do a special meeting?
If
we can.
If
Yeah.
If all ducks are in a row, there's no reason to wait.
Well, let's see what his
2 weeks.
schedule is and,
Right.
I mean, we've actually have, on other positions, interviewed people, got to the offer, and time went by, and they just, well, not that time went by, they were, and then they didn't want the job,
Yeah,
so
so
let's see how it happens. Okay. EMS committee, I would like to send the proposal, Jeff Tinley suggested we send it to Fitch for review on that.
If they're willing, like I asked Jeff, we emailed about this, if they're willing to do it and it's at a reasonable cost to us. I think that is worthwhile. This started with a recommendation made 1,000 years ago. So I'd be open to that. The one thing I will say is that there was an iteration that was sent with comments after I spoke to Chief Baldwin, that was sent to the full board. With a recommendation, he sent some of his comments. I think it's important to note, however, that the way this draft ordinance has been written really does position this commission or committee, EMS committee, commission committee, in very much in an advisory nature. They do not have, based on the way we've written this, the right to make policy. They're really advisory nature, which is different than some other commissions in town, where they are really having a much more hands-on. Their role, their powers are rather limited and to advisory. So I think that's an important distinction between some of the other commissions we do have in town. But I'm comfortable with that. What I'd ask is that we not belabor this, and it's a two-page ordinance. It's an hour to look at. This isn't a very complex thing. So what I'd ask, Jeff, is that by the time we meet again, we have a recommended revised and final ordinance for us to consider, so we can make a decision of what we're doing.
Can I suggest, because sometimes it helps with the process, if this goes to Fitch, and Fitch has some concerns or issues and whatnot, it would be more beneficial, rather than getting back, big redlined version from them, dealing with issues that may have already been discussed, that we get them in touch with Mike, Jennifer, Justin, who have been working on this over the last few months, and they have a conversation before they get to the point of doing something like that, if they have serious issues.
And I'm sure we'd gladly make ourselves available.
No question.
Thanks, Jeff.
I have one comment. I had suggested, maybe a couple meetings ago, that we open a discussion with the public on the EMS committee. I think I did anyway, and everybody seemed agreeable, but it seems like that part of the process may be being sidestepped here. Or is it worth having it open to public comment before we move forward or something like this?
Well, I'd be comfortable, certainly, once we have an ordinance to suggest, sharing that, posting that ordinance in advance of a public meeting, of one of our meetings, so the public has access to see it, so they can then join us during public comment as part of our normal course of business, and share their opinions and thoughts without question. I think we'd want to hear from them.
And we're required to, under the charter.
It's an ordinance, we have to do that.
To pass ordinances, we gotta publish it and.
Yeah, we'll publish
notice
it.
and all that.
So we'll follow our normal bylaws to do that. I think
Well, did we make a decision that we wanted to do an ordinance? We didn't.
Right, unless, we might get the
We haven't
recommendation might
decided
come
that,
back that it's
so
not.
We
Oh,
might
back
not make
up.
it an ordinance, and if that's the
Back up.
case, we can
Right.
still hear from the public.
But either way, I think you're right, we want to hear from the public.
But I don't know that you said that out loud.
But I think you might have, I think you might have. It might have been at the last meeting, actually.
Oh, I wasn't
Yeah,
here.
we were running.
Your most recent draft says ordinance, that's why I thought that.
Yeah, but I wrote that, I wasn't sure if it was, it's in the comments of the sidebar, so, all right. 5 minutes, Jeff.
No pressure, right? So under new business, I put down discussion of stipends, and that was a general thing. I would move to table that discussion to another time. In light of tonight, we don't have to deal with that tonight.
Table to another meeting or another?
We can, yeah.
Or, you're not gonna talk about it tonight?
No,
Okay, so.
okay. So nobody wants to hear the first selectman's report right away?
Can I add one item of potential new business? I've had complaints from residents on Jeremy's Swamp, the section that's closed, and they're very concerned about it never being reopened, and I think it might be appropriate if the board discusses, I'll make a motion to add Jeremy Swamp Road closure to new business.
I'll second.
Made and seconded, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And
I'm
we'll
not
add that
suggesting
after
we
the-
talk about it tonight, I just thought it would be, yeah, well, we did, but we don't have any, I'm concerned about it myself.
Is there any background there? I don't really
I'll
know
give-
all
There's a
that.
Jersey barrier across where it meets Halls Hill right now.
We can go over all that. We have
So we want to keep it on and discuss it,
That's my thought, is not
Discuss
talk
it at
about
our
it
next
tonight,
meeting?
but put it on there for
If you're hearing
future.
from folks, we should talk about it.
Well, why don't we go into executive session now? I'd move that we go into executive session and come back to finish our reports.
Okay, hold on.
Oh, sorry.
And then we go back in.
We have to go back in. So we're going into, we have made and seconded to go into the executive session to discuss strategy regarding pending workman's compensation case of Robert Bedard versus Town of Southbury, and inviting Scott Sugberg, Attorney Jeff Tinley, Attorney Ahern, and Art Mulligan in with us.
We gotta make the motion again. I
Okay.
gotta make the motion.
Motion is made.
I'll second it.
You'll second it.
Sure.
Any discussion? Mike is coughing, so we'll wait for him to make a seat. I'm sure you didn't want to. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed, and it carries.